As students, when we are first introduced to studying text in school, breaking apart the techniques used in form and prose and what they add to the story is often approached with an air of skepticism. A good example of this is the infamous "the curtains are blue." It's understandable how breaking apart these elements can sometimes come across as a little too artsy or pretentious, but it's worth investigating the reason analysis like this, including the occasion of reading too much into things, is done and why it's purposeful. The main thing to understand about any work, whether art or film or literature, is that it is all just a long list of tiny decisions. Yes, I want this here. No, I don't want to include that. Maybe I should switch A and B. If you're reading a book, the fact that the curtains were blue was written on paper has to be intentional because the author specifically went through the effort of typing out those 4 extra words and leaving it in throughout the drafting and revision process. The curtains are blue and the couple is sad, and someone had to make a decision to include this in the text or film. Or maybe we read too much into it and derive that the couple is sad based on the colour of the set dressing. Perhaps the character's favourite colour is blue and the author just needed a way to convey this subtly. Maybe the set designer just liked the mood, maybe it was the most budget-friendly colour, maybe red curtains would have interfered with the lighting setup. It's perfectly fair that in many instances, whether that be to save time, money, or possibly just apathy or inexperience, the curtains ended up blue. And then we come along and feel sad looking at the curtains because what we have done is analyse it into the sun and drawn some huge conclusion from the colour of some curtains. Fair. But drawing meaning out of something meaningless isn't necessarily invalid. Happy little accidents. One of my favourite examples of this is in The Graduate, as explained by Grant Doherty.
In this shot, their heads are individually framed by this split rear windshield, so even though they're together in this 2-shot, they're isolated in their own little mini-frame. The thing is, I couldn't figure out if Mike Nichols did that on purpose. So the split window in the back of the bus isn't in Buck Henry's script. It just says they get on the bus. The bus had nothing to do with it. When I found that out, I was kind of devastated, honestly.
Given art and literature's subjectivity, if an audience reads too much into the symbolism of something, so much so that it completely alters the story, it's still a valid interpretation despite it not being put there by the author. The author draws on their own experience of life and makes the curtains blue because in their own experience during a breakup, their living room curtains were blue. There is a very personal and intentional layer of meaning added to the film. Then the audience watches it, sees blue curtains, and is reminded of blue curtains in their favourite horror movie. The audience takes away an underlying sinister horror within the dynamics of the couple's relationship. This example hits both the intentionality and unintentionality of inserting meaning into text and film, and it hits a beautiful balance where the author creates meaning for themselves based on their own experience, and audience member receives meaning from their own experience. John over in the corner loves the colour blue, so he's happy, and Fred over there takes blue to symbolise tranquility, so he derives his own meaning from the shot based on that. Ultimately, meaning is important, whether intentional or not, and you cannot insert symbolism into a film and expect it to be read the same way by everyone every time. At the same time, you can accidentally add a whole new layer to the text from aesthetic or logical choices. So approaching text with this analytical eye is ultimately what gives a film or text a life of its own, and the meaning is, perhaps frustratingly, very freeform and ever-changing, although largely dependent on the author's intention to insert symbols and techniques into their work, and equally as reliant on the audience to be willing to interpret these symbols and scenes and structures freely based on their own experiences and beliefs.
No matter what anybody tells you, words and ideas can change the world.